ask me, I think someone likes you.
Why don't you come with me and let me show you something?
Show me what?
Just trust me.
There are days, though, when everything falls into place in a series of events so ridiculous.
My sister, no,
That if you paid attention, you'd realize you're hurtling straight into the arms of your destiny.
There's always a price to pay. You've just got to be bold enough to pay.
Tell me when we collide, will it be love or will you drive me crazy?
Does that mean you don't like chicken?
We love chicken, we're black.
Hi, sis.
Join lo umzabalazo.
Ngiyahamba mina la.
Awuyinda.
I die. She died.
Solitary.
Those are crazy people. People not ever believe that.
I want to change the face of education. Now, I mean, you changed the face of journalism. I'm here looking for the principal's office.
Sorry, girl, you're in the wrong place.
But I'm an English teacher.
Maar dis 'n Afrikaanse skool.
The spec said that you didn't need experience.
Ek weet nie kom jy toegelaat in hierdie skool. Kom.
Jy in jou nuwe Suid-Afrika. Vergeet dit, man.
You always blaming everyone in your life for your mistakes, so that's your fault, malume. Don't even think about it.
Charlotte, I've got my ways.
Asifika pasiyama bakule kona mnanza phuma emotweni ngiyocala ngimkhalela ngembumbulu.
Bangi!
Ukuthi ubobheka. Ukhamba kwakhe ebusuku.
Why are your people so obsessed in competing with our people?
Death penalty is crucial in South Africa today. Crime is sky high.
Don't your people have enough?
We have nothing.
We live.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another roundtable session hosted, presented, and brought to you by the Hartem Film Commission. And we have on the panel today with us for the day 5 session of the conversations, legends, big brothers, as well as veterans of the industry. My name is Adzi Uga, and for those who don't know or know me, I'm a film director. And with me today is Mandla N, Entitled Jeremy King, and Entitled Selo Mike Ngube. And I do not have to say any more than you've already heard from me, because their work and their reputation basically speaks for themselves. Gentlemen, welcome, good afternoon. So wonderful to have you with us today.
Hi, Ajay. Glad we could join you today.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Hey, it's good to be here. It's good to be here. Good to be here. Thank
Great.
you, Ajay.
It's fantastic having all of you here. I must say I'm in the presence of greatness. Let me just acknowledge that and give credit to who credit is due. Like they say, all protocols observed. And let's just get straight into it. We're here because, of course, there's a very, very, very topical and hot potato issue on the table. It's not one that is new to any one of us. It's very familiar. It affects each and every one of us in a particular way. And like the old saying goes, an injury to one is an injury to all.
Yep.
The situation in our film and TV industry does require addressing. One thing we're not here to debate is whether things that are happening right now are right or wrong. We do know that they're wrong. That is not what is up for debate right now. I suppose the issue is, how do we address what we know is wrong? How do we redress it? How do we fix things? How do we make these spaces safe for our women?
Yep.
And that's basically the responsibility and obligation of every practitioner in the South African film and TV industry right now. So we are going to lend our voices. I'm going to ask our honorable gentlemen to lend their voices towards this crusade right now, in terms of having this conversation to unpack how we can actually get to the promised land of safety for our women. It's been a long journey. It's been hard, and all of us have been touched in one way or the other. But I suppose today we will find ourselves shedding some light and hopefully coming up with some solutions. And for lack of a better word, restitutions and executions to more or less take us forward. I would not like to be having the same conversation same time next year. For me, progress has to be measurable. And what we'd like to do today is get to the bottom of having measurable progresses, measurable successes, and measurable outcomes in terms of sorting this issue out once and for all. So I'm going to open the floor. I'm going to ask you to basically introduce yourselves. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get the ball rolling without further ado. So
age before beauty. That the Mufukeng, that the market.
I thought you meant Mandla.
No,
Okay.
age before beauty.
Okay. Let me declare, I come from a high school culture of debates and a little bit of the academic kind of things. And I just thought, please allow me to just lay a foundation for what I'm going to say throughout in answering your questions. First of all, we're saying decolonizing spaces for women. But how does colonizing reflect itself? How does it show itself in the spaces for an actor, for a crew member, for a coordinator in the office? How does it look like? And broadly speaking, you enslave the woman. You keep them powerless so that they cannot negotiate or own anything. That's what colonizing is about. Two, you limit, you place the obstacles that abort and frustrate their efforts. In other words, when you are intimidated by them, somehow you put in places hurdles that you know they cannot surmount, and therefore you can keep them in that place. Three, you subvert their successes. And you take to yourself the economic and credit benefit for what they have done or what they are doing. And lastly, payment for opportunities that don't belong to slaves. The envelopes, the sheets, all those things are what you begin to see in that environment. And by the way, the people who enslave is everybody and anybody. There's no race, there's no local, there's no woman. Women do it, men do it, local do it, international do it. Everybody does it. If we hide that fact, we will not address that particular issue. And what are the weapons that these people use? The scarcity of opportunities. Look, there's a queue outside if you're not interested to give me what I want or do what I want you to do. The desperation. Oh, Ntate Jerry, anything you want, as long as you can give me. Ntate Mandla, as a belief man for my career, please give me a breakthrough. And that desperation. And then collusion for those around us. And by that, what I mean is the issue is not by only those people who do these things, but those who allow these things to happen around them. So turning a blind eye to these things is also our problem. And then the absence of policies and authority to hold people accountable. We don't name and shame. There's no policy that says on this set, blah, 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 on this production, on this, there's none of that. So we just do as we like. And so decolonizing, we will talk about later. But I just wanted to just frame for myself and those who are watching, just what are we talking about when we say decolonizing? What monster are we addressing? Let me stop there.
So let me set the ball rolling. Thank you very much for that, Ntate Jerry. Let's also address something that actually I think also will help us frame this particular conversation. We are men, and we are at the advantageous point of power. We are men who have been practicing. We are men who have been operating in this industry for a significant number of years. And we have been privileged by our position and by our power. Here we are right now speaking to an issue that affects women. Women whom are our sisters, our daughters, our friends, our wives, our partners. So you could say this is clearly a situation whereby the wolf will have to speak on behalf of the sheep. So we will have to basically engage with this sensitively and sensibly as well. And it's very easy to be general in terms of how we engage, but I want us to be specific. I want us to tell our stories. I want us to actually speak to the heart of the issue in terms of what we like to see. So I'm going to ask this one question and then we get the ball rolling with all the other questions. Is the state of affairs, in the South African film and TV industry a commendable one when it comes to gender-based violence and, of course, the toxic workspace that women experience virtually every day? Is the current state of affairs commendable?
You know, if I may just, because Brajeri summed the whole thing up, and it was very good that I allowed Age to, to direct us here. You know, one thing that I wanted to say, just to commensurate what Brajeri has said, is that colonization is patriarchal in nature, and I've always found myself drawing a similarity between the liberation of Black people with the liberation of women. And when you look at them, somehow there's a way where, for instance, even the oppressed basically colluded, with the oppressor in order to oppress them. And also you would find that somehow women themselves find themselves having to collude with the patriarchal nature that, that is happening, in the space. But one thing that we are going to have to do, as you had said, Adze, is that we are going to have to be, I think, very frank, authentic, and direct to the thing, to the topic. And as much as it would be like, it is the wolf speaking for the sheep. In this case, I think it is the wolf talking to other wolves. You know what I mean? And basically saying to the other wolves, this kind of behavior is not acceptable. And we are the ones who have got to, because we are the ones who are going to have to call each other out in the first place. So, and by calling each other out, by addressing issues that are pertaining to this, to gender-based violence in the workspace, I think basically almost it will even maybe sensitize us to make sure that we don't carry it even homebound, even to our homes. And maybe let me leave it there for now and not take too much space. Yes.
Let me rephrase that question again, right?
Okay.
In terms of our state of affairs, are we better off than before or are we worse off?
Are we better off? It's a very interesting question. Are we better off or are we worse off? If, for instance, I don't think we are, I don't know, maybe we are, I don't know whether we are better off or worse off. Because if you look at also, even like I said, like I started by saying, colonization in its makeup, it is very patriarchal. You know what I mean? And when you look at patriarchy, you actually can see it. Basically, patriarchy goes hand in hand with power. You know what I mean? And almost, I think we got to actually even get to a space, and maybe not trying to be philosophical here, that you will realize that patriarchy also is just basically a spirit more than can be associated with gender. You know what I mean? Because women in power, sometimes you would find that they would basically almost act like like men when they have power. But the truth of the matter is that where the problem is at is actually with the male gender, and I think men, we basically are caught in a situation because somehow life is moving, even culture is moving, even ways of doing things are changing. For instance, I mean, when we were growing up, for instance, it was, in order to get the attention of a girl, you actually had got to, approach her, and there were different ways. There were harsh ways, and there were also maybe clever, smart ways. You know what I mean? And sometimes things don't operate in that way anymore. Human behavior has actually mutated because of the influences of other cultures. So instead of being better off, I think basically now we are faced with a more complex situation, and we need to apply a more complex approach, or maybe a very simplistic way in trying to find a solution to this complex problem now.
Mandla?
All right. First of all, thank you very much. It's an honor. How's it? Can you hear me? I think you can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much. It's an honor being part of this panel with such legends, and also as well, on my side, I mean, I'll speak on behalf of obviously young producers and young creatives within the industry. And my experience, coming into the industry, it's always been, as a young man, you go out there, you're a go-getter, you go get what you want and all of that. And what I find is that these types of conversations never ever happen. As young people, we are not having these conversations. When we look at this space, especially when you go into production, it's always, okay, let's have HOD meet, let's have meetings around creative, let's have meetings around, okay, how we're going to basically run the production, but never the culture of the film industry that we are in. And if you look at other corporate companies, there's culture management, there's a brand culture within the workspace, but within production, it's kind of like we go in there, we mine the films and get them out. So for the first time ever, I'm about to shoot a production where I'm going in and I'm saying, my first production meeting is basically addressing the equality and these issues. And also we're going to separate the men within the production and speak about these issues and educate, because a lot of the time, as you are saying, Mr. Silo, as men, we are used to, shela and all sorts of things. We play in ways where, a lot of men think, it's innocent and all of that. But then they push it too much. It becomes a violation. So that's the type of education that we need to speak about when we start our productions. That must be on the forefront of every single production meeting before going in, because at the end of the day, we need to always make sure that it's in the forefront of what people, of obviously, the production crew, the people that are going into production, so that they're educated, they are aware of it all the time. And it's not just something that, you speak about on the beginning of production process and then leave it. It must be something that you reiterate. So every single week or start of a new week, we need to basically speak about that. Not only as men, but also women, and also as a collective, to say, okay, cool, we are doing well, this is where we are going, and let's be conscious of it and let's move. And I find myself now going into production, that is part of a huge agenda. And it's thanks to forums like this, thanks to JFC for obviously putting up this panel to educate a lot of the men. Because most of the time we think like, within urban spaces, yeah, this is happening, this is out there, this, people are aware of it. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of education that needs to happen. And that's what, obviously, on my side, I'm conscious of and I'm doing on a daily basis, not only for me, but also for my production crew as well.
Okay, so fantastic. So we kind of have consensus, even though we have not said it directly, but we do believe the situation actually has not improved over the years. That women basically working in the film and TV space have found themselves at the receiving end of abuse, of harassment, coercion, and of course, assault. Now, let's talk about why that has been the case. Why has it gotten worse? Why is it that men have always felt entitled to harass? Why is it common practice for men to sweep this behavior under the carpet even when it is brought about? And what is responsible for these violations? I want to believe that the film and television space is a professional space.
I think like also adds a...
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah. This is, people are not... Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
You know what I mean? The punishment. We need to punish behaviors. People are not getting punished for those types of behaviors. So obviously, we know within sets, especially on my side, as running a production company, I need to make sure that when I see that type of behavior, I call it out and it becomes a dismissal. So a lot of the men over the years have not been punished for those types of consequences. And that's why it's basically continued.
Okay, Jerry, your thoughts?
Ajay.
Yes, sir.
Going back to your first question without saying much about it, sometimes things have not gone worse. It's just that we have become more conscious and more vocal about those things because our parents took it as normal. That's why they always spoke about nyamezela only to the women and nothing is said to the men within a marriage culture. Now, when we started going into productions theater and productions television, the couch became normal to the point that other women would say to the other newcomer, listen, there are ways of getting up the ladder. Otherwise, forget it. Your pride, your dignity, your integrity is career limiting. I ran a workshop in a major company and women afterwards say, Jerry, we hear what you're saying. The fact of the matter is what we are talking about here is career limiting. So It's gone on and on and on because there is nothing and no one to call these people to order. As men, we can see the one who sources the extras and then telling his friends on crew, listen, I've got this kind of crop for you today. It's almost like when people go to Makufe and get their friends to get students from the university. So it's become a culture of silence. And it is the silence, I think, more than anything, the collusion and the silence that we need to address amongst ourselves, to the point of then possibly ourselves being blacklisted for jeopardizing so-and-so's production or business or what have you, because who do you think you are? This is not your production. This is not. Let me leave it there for now.
I'll come to Teteselo in a minute, but I am aware of certain actresses, right, who have been vocal about harassments, right, from male counterparts, cast and crew. And when they went vocal about these same issues, what happened was that there was a silent blacklisting. Many of those actresses were unable to get work on other projects because they were flagged as being problematic by the previous production, whereby they raised their voice in the name of being vocal about harassment.
Yeah.
Now they find themselves marginalized, ostracized, kept in a corner, like you said, sir, career limited, right? Teteselo, how would you, or what would you have to say in terms of just giving some thought with regards to that sort of consequence? Because from what is clear and what Mandla has said, there's punishment there's punishment quite okay that is coming into place for men who are guilty. But it also seems like there's punishment for the women who have also become victims of such.
Well, I mean, that is what has basically, happened in the thing. And I think for me, that is why I say, we got to look at this thing almost in a very broad aspect. And look at how, for instance, like socially, how does this patriarchal spirit also functions, and also even now in basically in gender relations, how does this patriarchy happen? Because for me, this is all about the what is it? It's about power relations, and when power relations are at play, because it actually even amounts to the thing, and maybe in this case, maybe one has got to actually maybe stay focused on the sexual harassment. You know what I mean? And then not play on the whole power play, because then it actually just sort of like confuses it. Sexual harassment is I mean, like I said earlier on, that there was this whole thing that in the past we were just used to ukshela and all that and whatever, and also, and when you look at ukshela in itself, ukshela had something about having to persist on something. You know what I mean? And I think basically now things have got to change in such a way that even if what is it, that kind of culture has got not to happen, maybe even in the workspace. You know what I mean? If ever people need to meet socially, let them meet socially, but let them not use the workspace as a place, to try and be social with one another. You know what I mean? So I guess, I mean, and that in itself, it's going to, I mean, it's a very complex, and it's going to complicate maybe even relations, but maybe one needs to actually be able to draw those lines, and so that even again, when it comes even to acting, that the lines are drawn very clearly how things are going to be done.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned culture, and Tete Jerry, I want to just throw this question to you. Do you believe culture is partly responsible for the persistence of this toxic nature that we see on film and television sets?
Yes, I believe the old traditional culture and the unacceptable film and television culture, both of them. Both of them. Listen, please understand, sometimes we want to run away from this word patriarchy. What's central to that is the entitlement of men and the excusing of men. In other words, don't you understand he's a man? And the fact that he's a man, it's almost as though he is disabled. He can't do otherwise. There's no responsibility, there's no accountability. Just like the animals that have a mating season, you can't hold them responsible. So these men on sets, in the casting rooms and whatever, they can't help it. And until we say they can and they should. They can and they should.
They should.
And if when Mandla has that meeting with his production and he says, listen to me, none of this nonsense will be tolerated in this production, and it is a dismissible offense. And they'll, believe you me, even women will call him names. Even women, because for those who don't know how to do business and how to do film and television without the sheets, then you've disarmed all of them and they don't know then how to get the roles without the envelopes and the sheets.
So I've got a message that came through from Nobuntu Webster, and this is what she says: it's noble to speak about punishment, predatory behavior, but this is not possible if it is not contained in company policy. Production companies must be willing to enshrine this in their policy. Your thoughts?
Well, that says it, actually. You know, for me, that says it. It has to be in, you know, it has to be company policy.
So Mandla, for example, right now, in your contracts for crew and cast, is there a clause that deals with harassment and violations of such nature?
Right now, we have made it a huge priority, and it's only because of because we can see the revolution is happening. You know, we need to change this behavior. Also, you know, coming to the fact that there's a lot of people that get affected. You know, sometimes if women speak up, they also get every revolution. There's teething stages. There's also casualties in the beginning. But after that, it's going to be a culture. We're starting a new culture. A lot of people are going to basically now see it as the norm later on in life. But before that, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to not understand it. People are going to resist it. People are going to go against it. And it's up to us to constantly just reiterate it in every step of the way. And also, we cannot behave like, you know, people understand it. It's the norm. You know what I mean? Obviously, you know, people, you know, they are expected not to sexually harass other individuals at work. But for other people, it's second nature to them. So we need to always reiterate in the workplace and put it in every single contract, to a point where we are putting it right up on set, exactly like when we put call sheets up. It needs to be exactly like that. It needs to be a culture that we enforce. And as I said, there will be casualties in the beginning, but once it starts becoming the norm, we'll be in a much better place as the film industry.
You know, I remember when the president was addressing the country a few weeks ago, and then he mentioned that the gender-based violence in South Africa right now is also a pandemic, right? And a pandemic, of course, is something that calls for urgent intervention. And you will see everywhere you go, in terms of the corona pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, every office you go to, every workplace, I'm talking about every workplace, every school place, every social place has signs up there warning people, wear your mask, sanitize, keep your distance. It's written in red everywhere you go. Billboards telling you, thou shalt not, or this thou shalt do. And in my opinion, the policies that basically make their ways into our contracts should also be that visible on every wall of every production office and every production company and every production set, in terms of telegraphing what is acceptable behavior for anybody, so that once you enter that space, you know you are under contract to behave a certain way. And if you don't, you suffer the consequences, be you male or be you female. You know, so yeah, yes, sir.
Sorry, Adze. Sorry to interrupt. My apologies for interrupting you. As you're talking about that, we have a pandemic, and then GBV is also regarded as a pandemic. And the other thing is that for the pandemic, we are actually, coming all together and sensitizing ourselves around the thing. And with this conversation, I actually feel that this is us actually, and I think it's very appropriate for us to have this conversation on the subject, because it is us who have got to actually start addressing these things with other men. I love this. There's this little anecdote of a carpenter working, in his workshop, and he's got a little boy, 7-year-old, and the 7-year-old. I'm coming with a story now. He's working with a 7-year-old, and as he's working, the 7-year-old keeps coming, Papa, what is this? Papa, what is this? And he's distracting the old man from, doing his work. Now, in the workshop, there is a map of the world on the wall. So the father takes it off, tears it into pieces, throws it on the floor, gets a sellotape, gives it to the boy and says, put this map together. And, that distracts the boy for a while the old man is working. After a while, the boy comes back, and says, hey, Papa, look, I put it together, And the father says, wow, that's beautiful, But now here's the thing. Behind the map of the world, there is a drawing of a man's head. Okay. And the moral of the story is, if man can get his head together, the world would be a better place to be. Now, we have this thing also in culture, or in our culture, and we say, man is the head of the household. Okay? And now let's play with that analogy, or with that, for a while, and take it a little further. And we look at the physiological makeup, or the physiological duties of the head on the body. On the head, you find 2 eyes. On the head, for to be able to see and have vision. And on the head, you find ears to be able to hear, any dangers and whatever, and be able to communicate with the world. On the head, you have the nose, On the head, you have the nose, which brings oxygen to the body. On the head again, you've got the mouth, which is used for communication, which is used again for, putting food into the body. But on the head, fundamentally as well, or most importantly, you have the brain. You know what I mean? And this goes, it hangs to this thing, how Brajeri, of saying, he's a man, and as if man cannot control himself. Now, if we take now that you as a man, let's say you are the head, and you look at what the head does to the body. The body, the brain, the head regulates everything that is on the body. And it regulates it with precision. It never even basically abdicates its duties or even go tired. As long as your brain is working well, there is consciousness at all times. So one thing that we actually have got to teach now is consciousness, and basically what is it, moral consciousness, whatever, decorum consciousness, and those things, we've got to bring them back. And sometimes we think that all these things one will learn by osmosis. It is impossible. Maybe sometimes there's got to be even etiquette classes, as far as even acting is concerned on set. You get what I mean? And even the etiquette of how we're going to actually, if we are going to play into that space, how do we do it in such a way that we don't infringe on people's privacies and liberties?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for these inputs. And just want to bring us back again to a particular point. Mandla mentioned about, going down the line in the near future, this will be the new culture, right? Whereby we have this framework whereby what you've said now in Tataselo will be the norm, whereby people basically are inculcated and basically taught. But let's talk about now. Let's talk about what's going to happen now, because the future is still coming. So, but that future will be determined by what we do now. How do we make this spaces safe? You're a young actress, you're coming into the industry, right? You've gone to school and you've got your training, you've got your degree, and you've done your auditions. How do you, or how do we assist the young ones coming into this industry and prevent them from falling victims to these sort of violations and ill treatments? What do we do now to help us address the issue?
I think, Ate, partly people like GFC, if they say anyone and everyone that we fund, here is a code of conduct that we expect. And we also have monitors to make sure that it happens, just as one, to make sure about that. And then those men that have bought into this, those wolves that have bought into this, become catalysts, one set at a time, one production at a time. Listen, I don't think this person will mind. Yesterday, I said to an actress I'm working with, look, I can see here and there you're struggling with our language, yes, Sesotho. Whether I'm on set or I'm at home, feel free to call me for assistance, and you don't have to give me or pay me anything. Now, it's like, did you just say that? I say, yeah, I just said that. Because there must be no strings attached to all those who are ahead, assisting those who are following behind. And that is why, you see, a lot of things cannot happen by committee. They cannot. They need champions. They need pioneers. They need men for all seasons who stand alone in a production and do it. And Mandla becomes the exception. When you work with Mandla, you're protected. We can tell all the actresses. Even when in your audition, don't promise anybody anything. And Mandla puts a lady in those auditions to make sure that the ladies are protected, those kinds of things. But for me, one of the things is the staple singers say, I'm just another soldier in the army of love. And I'm asking for soldiers of this ideal in this industry, one production at a time.
Thank you for that. Any more, gentlemen? That's actually powerful. I cannot hear you, Tataselo. Selo is muted.
You are on mute, Tataselo.
You are on mute, Selo.
Okay, all right, okay, man. I can hear you. But here's the thing. I think also what we need to, I don't know if GFC can initiate this, but there's an idea that we should have where a call can be made for problems that whatever, like people in the industry, to call to that thing, and then that thing should be, but also the thing is that we don't have, whatever, what body would we go to that would help to actually resolve these kind of issues? If ever, then maybe this thing has got to be addressed by, is it IPO or CIFSA or SAGA, all these other organizations for the crew members. You know what I mean? But there should be a place where when a person feels uncomfortable, if they can't, the production can't deal with it, then that person should be able to go outside the production to have this matter addressed. But maybe even to have a number where people can call when they are in distress of being sexually harassed.
Absolutely. In the corporate space, most companies, be it the banks, insurance companies, and even manufacturing industries, they have what we call human resources. You know, I don't remember actually ever working on any production whereby I know that there was a human resource, because that line item doesn't even exist in the budget. You know, the company might have a human officer, but the productions don't. So, and of course, you are afraid of engaging with the executive producer, you know, of course, then you are at a disadvantage, you know, but something of that nature is what is commonplace in most corporate spaces, because like I said, the film and TV space is a professional one. It's not
But I think what Silo is talking about is something like an ombudsman.
An ombudsman
in the industry. Yes.
I see. I just got a quick message now from a lady, and I don't know if I should say her name, but she just says, she got a question. Gentlemen, how would you advise a young girl, a crew member, who got harassed on set by a cast member and also a crew member at the same time, and nothing was done about her complaints till she had a mental breakdown?
You know, that is just said, you know, that is just said, but that's what happens, you know what I mean? But I guess, you know, in having this conversation, you know, we are trying to make sure that that thing doesn't happen ever again, you know. And I think, who was it? Somebody, you know, spoke about, you know, in this whole thing, there's going to be there are going to be casualties, you know what I mean? But in order to prevent any more casualties of this kind, we have to start putting in measures. And you see, like, if ever this young woman had a place where he, you know, like he could go and call, you know, and call somebody, and then so that basically that ombudsman comes and deals with the production company, that would have been something else. You know what I mean? So maybe GFC
can we take a chance? Can we take a chance and say, for starters, let them be given a number at GFC where they can call, and then they'll be referred somehow. You know, that is until a more lasting solution is found.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just give them a number to call at GFC, because I think GFC has called this forum because they're sick and tired of this going on as though it is normal, and there's nothing that can be done. I think the GFC is not as paralyzed as individuals are, and I hope that GFC can do that.
Yeah, well, basically, yes. We all hope so too, to basically position structures to be able to address people who need interventions immediately. I'm just looking at this young girl's, I can see her face on the chat group, and I you know, you can see there's vulnerability and of course the lack of power per se to be able to have her case known. If you're a young actress or a young crew member who is not very powerful or popular, you know, you're at a disadvantage. If you are known, it's easier for you to actually, like some artists will resort to social media and say, this has happened to me, that has happened to me on this set and that set, and then it becomes a flood of outrage that eventually leads to something being done. But when you don't have that kind of presence on social media, who do you go to in the interim? Who can you contact immediately? Who do you report to say, I have this problem? And like Jerry said, a structure will be fabulous and sooner rather than later for aggrieved crew members, especially women, to be able to put their cases through the pipeline for redress. I've got another question.
And I think even just to add on that, sorry, Adze, that sir? Also, I think, I don't know if ever there is an organization that is an organization of production companies, you know what I mean, where production companies are actually affiliated to, you know, and if there is that kind of an organization, or that organization needs to be formed, you know what I mean, so that even every production company should be the one that actually issues that number to its whatever crew and cast and crew. That should there be a problem, this is the number to call, and now that actually forms the the ombudsman that Brajeri has actually came with the word for that I was lacking, you know.
I want to talk about.
I think also, I'd say, at some point, let's give out the details for Swift.
Yes.
And yeah, let's give out the details for Swift, and maybe one of us later can actually read out what the objectives of Swift are, because they really are advocating very strongly for women in the industry, not just actors, but every woman who finds themselves in this industry. So we thank God for institutions, organizations like that.
No, we do thank God for Swift. But as you notice, the constitution of this panel is all men. You know what I mean? And Swift, of course, is, you know, our sisters. But what about us, the brothers? What about us, the men? You know what I mean? What about us, the wolves? You know,
But not everybody knows about Swift, Adze. That's why we need to foreground the good work that they're doing.
Absolutely.
Because I do know they are talking to the funding institutions to say, you guys, everybody that you fund, can you please make it compulsory that this policy is part of what you put on their table, so that anyone that is found guilty, you can even withhold your money.
Absolutely. I'm looking at a document right now from Swift, which is the Code of Good Practice, Handling Sexual Harassment in the Film and TV Industry. So they do have a framework for dealing with this, and they are actively pursuing it. And which brings me to a point, Ntadejari, that you've raised, which is about the money. About the money.
Yeah.
About the money. You know, and it's a conclusion I want to arrive at. Is there a monetary aspect towards the perpetration of violations on film sets and also in production companies? Is there a correlation between money and the harassment?
I said at the beginning of my presentation, what are the tools that these people use? And the economic status of the people that they are wanting to exploit comes into picture. And the desperation of the people who, because there's a long queue out there, they don't beg. And even if they have said to the production house, to the broadcasters and to GFC, this is our budget, they can have it and know that they can exploit anybody because there's a long queue outside. So the economic climate and the opportunities to exploit is being exploited to the hilt.
Yes, Mandla?
Another thing that I want to, encourage our white brothers and our white sisters. This is not, it seems like when you speak a lot about gender-based violence, you know, you find a lot of black sisters speaking about it and not a lot of white sisters and white brothers. Also now, I mean, if you look at the film industry, you understand, you know, we experience a lot of racism and all of that, but we need our white brothers and our white sisters to be speaking about it, because as we know, they attract the funding from corporate companies, because that's where a lot of the funds are. And obviously they've got a huge voice when it comes to economic transformation, because obviously they live in sectors where they can fund such initiatives. They can fund institutions such as Swifts to do a lot more work. So I'd like to encourage a lot of, our, executive producers, our white companies that work within the space to also be quite vocal and ask for those fundings within corporate South Africa, especially the commercial industries. I mean, commercial industries, it's flooded with, obviously, white businesses and things like that. And they've got a lot of the funds that can assist this movement that we are doing, because it's not a black problem, especially topics such as sexual harassment in the workplace and gender-based violence. We as Black brothers and sisters are constantly vocal about it. But, you know, a lot of the resources and funds, you know, we could do a lot of. So I also encourage a lot of them to basically be part of this fight and fight with us so that we can unlock corporate funding and assist these movements.
Thank you very much for that. That's actually also, I suppose, like a pipe in the right direction towards how we solve this problem. I also want to talk about, you know, representation. You know, so we talk about sexual harassment, we talk about, of course, gender-based violence, but there's also the issue of representation. I'm talking about, you know, employment equity and also in terms of people getting paid what they're due and what they're worth. You know, do you feel there's a balance, you know, in terms of how women are being paid in the industry with regards to men, and also with regards to how women are being attached to positions, especially senior positions, with regards to the film and TV industry?
No, I think that's a question for producers.
One in the house.
Or two, even. Very young producer. So a lot of, you know, the women legends that I employ, you know, I'm first of all a fan of them. So you know what I mean. We negotiate with agents, and whatever they want and require, you know, we fulfill, and we gladly fulfill because obviously of where I'm coming from as a young producer. But I do get you, Adze, you know, and I think agents, because most of the time, you know, the agents are the ones that are responsible when it comes to negotiating people's salaries. And I think agents need to be vigilant, and they need to understand that, you know what, you know, you need to really represent your client as equal and as fair as possible. So this conversation needs to be extended to agents, and agents need to be aware of that, because as producers, we never deal directly with talent, we deal with agents.
And well, back to this issue of representation also. You know, like I said in the beginning, we're all storytellers, you know, we are filmmakers, and in one way or the other, we contribute to the storytelling landscape of South Africa and Africa and the world at large. And I want to hazard a guess and actually say that it's very, very possible that there is also a correlation between gender-based violence, sexual harassment, and also exploitation, you know, of the female gender because of the kind of content we see on TV. The stories we tell, how we position these stories, from what I've seen in the landscape, it's quite possible to relate that to the nature of how society is behaving. You know how they say art imitates life, and sometimes life imitates art. You know, back to the question of what roles we have played personally and directly in either aiding or basically preventing the scourge of, you know, harassment and coercion and exploitation that we see on our film sets, especially with regards to women.
I think the answer will come from everybody for that one, because the producers, those who commission productions within the broadcasting, the writers, everybody. Look, it's not only men who write minor roles for women so that we can pay them less. It's everybody. And so we need to address it at the beginning of this entire value chain, so that we then can begin to say, how come we are presenting a male point of view in this story? How come? Can we find another way of telling the same story, so that, you know, we don't do what was happening in the past? In the past, what used to happen is Black stories were told through white heroes' mind. You know, Steve Biko is not big enough to tell a story about, so find the editor of the newspaper so that becomes the hero the savior of Steve Biko. Steve Biko needed no savior, but somehow the international market wants a white hero and a white lead and blah, 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 blah. So similarly, we need to re-educate ourselves to say you can tell a good story with a female lead, with a woman point of view. And I guess the sisters can assist us in that regard. So it's an opportunity. I don't want to say it's a problem. It's an opportunity for everybody to actually tell compelling stories that do foreground the women and what they have done. You know, I'll give you an example. This is theatrical, but I did a production of The Island, and I decided to do it with a female cast. I haven't seen any other production like that. And I just thought, I'm going to do it. What am I saying? It's not only Black people who got us this freedom, and it's not only men who got us this freedom. And so the dynamics that you begin to say, that you begin to see on that stage, tell that with a story that you know from the past and all the way. So I just think that opportunity is available to all of us.
I think you're very, very right. And also as well, I mean, you know, you've got Minister Farrakhan who basically says we expect women to give birth to the Messiah, and yet we don't expect women to be in the same room as the Messiah. It doesn't make sense. And also as well, I think if there can be a lot of people like you, Mr. J. Mfukeng, who take those risks, you know, to basically say, I'm going to cast a female lead. And also as well, I mean, us as Black Brain as well, you know, I think it was 5 years ago, we took a huge risk for a huge drama, and we said we're going to create a prison show with all female leads, you know, to be in the forefront of that. And it really paid off, those types of risks. And the more risks that practitioners and writers and creatives take, it's going to lead us into that better place. And I think it is changing. We are seeing a little bit of it, but as I said, you know, it's still the teething stages of a revolution. It is going to go there. Before that, it wasn't heard of where you've got an all-female lead. And now it's becoming, cool. What's next? Where are we going? And it's these types of baby steps that is going to lead us to where we all need to be.
Tatiselo?
No, absolutely. Well, I don't think, I think the gentlemen have really just, you know, addressed the point very well, you know, and I think I'll be just again, repeating what has been said. You know, yeah, I think maybe we can move to, I mean, to but yeah, it is, I mean, they've articulated it very well. Give due ways, you know, where it's deserved.
Absolutely. I mean, I also feel like there is the issue of the quantity of the representation, but at the same time, again, also an issue with the quality of the representation. You know, like how are women being represented on screen? So, for example, my daughter is 10 years old and she's watching TV, and basically all the women characters that she's seeing are basically positioned in a particular way. So, fine, you know, there's gender roles. You know, so there's the mother roles, of course, there's the, you know, the wife role and all of the others, and then you've got the other roles. But in terms of representation, like how successful do you think we have been in terms of representing women in the diversity of their existence in reality as they should be on TV? Like how?
You know, with that, for me, and now it actually basically goes to the thing that I was saying, how patriarchy and goes hand in hand with colonialism, and basically in this case, white colonialism. You know what I mean? And Brajeri has just hinted, you know, what, because that is also colonization, but of another sort. You know what I mean? And I guess the whole thing, and patriarchy has always viewed itself, you know, and that is why I say it has to do with power. And I think the moment we get to a position, and I mean, the women's struggle and Black people's struggle is always the same. Black people, we are still trying to find our own voice in telling stories the way we want. You know what I mean? Because, and we are busy trying to, you know, wade out of the, you know, like the murk that has been created by white colonization, you know, and the white view. And women now also now have to find themselves having to really clear the way of the male dominated, you know, and whereas on one hand we have white dominated, you know, and I think this is a process that as Black people we have to go through and be in communication with ourselves on it, you know, and also begin to chart a path, you know, and a way for how we want to actually represent ourselves, you know. And I think we have, you know, maybe the next conversation that we need to have is a conversation between men and women, you know, and on how best we can begin to tell our stories better as Black people first and foremost.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, it's always about the balance, you know, but where do you start and where do you stop? But, you know, I always like already, you know, the women's stories are already at a serious disadvantage. You know what I mean? In terms of how our society is positioned, which brings me to the next issue of violence against women. And what violence actually really represents and how violence is manifested. Because before you even get to the issue of harassment and coercion, and before you even get to the issue of exploitation, there's always that issue of violence. And my understanding of violence is not that violence is any kind of act that basically is physical and antagonistic towards any woman. But violence is any act against any woman that basically compels her to make a choice that she did not want to make. Any kind of manifestation of male power that puts a woman in any position that makes it uncomfortable for her to make the choice that she would rightly want to make. And it feels like that manifests itself in so many ways on our film sets and also on our production houses. And that is what eventually leads to the other manifestations of actual physical violence, whether it's harassment, whether it's exploitation, or even coercion. And it's about how do we start as men checking our power? Because I'm seeing right now on the chat group, people are, of course, commenting, and a lot of the messages coming forward are, why are these panelists all men? You know, and we are seen automatically as people with power, people with position. People are people look up to for potential employment and for potential privilege and opportunity. You know, so how then do we show up in a space that basically ascribes a certain kind of perspective to us, that we now don't use that perspective in a predatory way, in a way that is basically wrong? How do we do that? You know, and this is a question, or the answer should, you know, be able, should appeal to the smallest in the room.
You know, like I said earlier on, that this kind of platform, as we are having it now, you know, it is us men talking to one another and basically calling each other out, you know. And I think basically that is the reason, I think for me, well, that was not the reason that was stated, but that is the reason that I find, you know, and that we have got to be the ones that call each other out. And that actually says, you know, when we do this, this is wrong, you know. And I think also, instead of maybe even, you know, for instance, let me put it this way, let me go direct to a thing. You know, there is a situation where when they say no, a no is a no. You know, in fact, I had there's a play that I wrote, and there's a line that I wrote, and I said, "A no is a no, not a flip side of a yes." You know, but when we say a no is a no, now there's a thing that guys would hear a no and choose it to be a no that is supposed to be like, no, but I'm okay, no, but keep carrying on. You know what I mean? And there is a time when a guy would hear a no, and which is a no, but chooses to think no, that this is a no that is still kind of like saying yes in it, you know. And I think basically it will take another guy to tell the guy that said, look, dude, when you hear a no, don't try to position it, take it as a refusal, you know, because a guy would want to argue it out, you know what I mean? And I think it will take another guy to tell another one to say, hey, a no is a no and nothing else. Okay. You know, and I think for me.
But before you continue, sir, so let's go back to little bit of the same issue right now. You know,
yes,
when you imagine a film set scenario, right? Men and women have come to work. You know, they've come to earn a living. They've come to exchange their craft for value, which is money, right?
Yes.
And women are and so I want to imagine and believe that the women are there to do what they were hired to do. You know, but why is it that men feel that they're there to work, get money, and to get more than just the money? You know, why must a man feel like I should be able to get a favor from a female crew member or a cast member alongside the salary that I'm getting? Where does that even come from? Because
I think
the
you
short
know,
answer, Ajay, it's patriarchy and culture. That's the short answer. We can expand on that if we need to, but that's what it is. And here's one of the issues for me. Boselo batlan twos. Nobody calls the black man to order. Hear what I'm saying? Nobody calls the black man to order, especially when he's got power. Nobody. Not the law, not the church, not the film industry, not each other. Nobody does it. Because
and also, you know, go ahead, Brajel.
No, that one too.
Okay. No, but you know, another thing, and now when we get into this thing, Brajeri summed it up nicely and added, you know, it's patriarchy and culture. And again, we got to remember that this actor, you know, this film crew basically comes from a certain society. And now you look what kind of a society we live in. On the road, the taxi driver doesn't give anybody a machine. You know what I mean? They become a law unto themselves. You know, and hence Brajeri puts it like, when a black man has got power, not even the law, not even the government actually basically gives that person or calls them to order. So we got to look at the society that we're coming from, you know, and begin even to address that kind of a society, and maybe even that falls head on what kind of stories do we as creatives begin to tell.
I've got a comment here from Ayanda Boroto. Just like white people need to talk to each other about racism, men must talk to each other about GBV. You will not listen to those you already undermine, which is basically what you're saying, that the men must speak to the men, the wolf must speak to the wolves.
Yes.
And also, going back to what Dr. Jerome Fouquet was saying, patriarchy and culture. How we raise our boy kids is very different to how we raise our girl kids. You understand? All the time it's like, you know, as men, we are raised differently, you know? And we need to, obviously, as a society, look at fundamentally how we are raising our kids, and we need to raise them equally. And that, you know, because early child development is everything. And I mean, you blink already 18 years has gone by, you understand? So that's why we need to make sure that how we raise our kids is going to ultimately reflect on how they are going to behave later on in life.
Absolutely, 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 absolutely. I mean,
and allow me to say and send a challenge to the legends and so-called stars and leaders to lead by example. All right?
Yeah.
Even where they get or where we get offers of hospitality because of the desperation of the women who are next to us, and we say no, and yet still assist those people. I'm challenging the men who are the legends and the stars and the powerful and the decision makers to lead by example. And you see, when you say no to yourself, you own the no. When you do it because GFC has said it, you don't own it. You're just afraid to lose your contract and your money. But when you say no before the policy, and you then say to everybody, well, I started with, there's no production I'm going to direct that anybody's going to use the F word, because I have chosen never to use that, never to violate anyone, never to disrespect anyone. Now, with what's happening, I mean, yesterday I took the SWIFT code of conduct and I sent it to the production manager of the film I'm going to act in next time. And I said, look, I'd like this addressed somehow so that even if in a call sheet they say we align ourselves with the SWIFT code of conduct, just that, it says something. And if I see anyone, but anyone, including the person that signs my check, bruh, we don't do that. You don't do that to Black sisters. So I'm addressing the thing I mentioned earlier, that we're not only guilty by commission by doing it, but we're also guilty by omission, by turning a blind eye to it. And then the sharks continue to go wild around us.
So I've got a note, a chat from Elarato and Lovu, and this is what she says. I don't think we will ever win against patriarchy. This is a girl now speaking. It's a strong. We are beginning to adapt to this sad reality. So basically, what we are seeing in terms of even women ready to concede to the casting couch, as far as she's concerned, is an adaptation to patriarchy's stronghold. And I'm supposed.
That is sad. Yeah, that is sad. That is sad. You know, bro. That is sad. And I think you know, sometimes I think men can maybe function very, what is it? What's the word? They can be myopic. You know what I mean? And if ever you're going to be looking at your situation only on the basis that you are having the power now and you are enjoying the privilege that goes with it, and which is what, for instance, I would say that's what white colonialism and apartheid suffered from. They enjoyed the privilege of, you know, creating a terrible normal. You know what I mean? And that Black people found themselves adapting to. You know what I mean? And but this is the whole thing. Like I said, it you know, power is patriarchal, and it is patriarchal not only because it is white. It can also be it is patriarchal now. Even when you look at Zimbabwe, partly even somehow when you look at even our situation here in South Africa, you know. But the thing is, it is sad to actually hear a young woman saying, you know, I'm adapting to this. You know what I mean? And it is incumbent on us as men and begin to actually, you know, trying to make sure that we address that kind of a thing. I had a situation, and I sort of that I had to deal with, where now I found, I mean, there was a young woman who was basically under my tutelage, and because he was in a desperate situation, I was also seeing that there she was going to end up basically even, you know, sleeping with somebody on the basis that that person was in a position of power in my environment. And what I did, I actually took a very strong step and said, oopsie, outie, I got it, just me bra, but we're going to have to hold it here. You know what I mean? And because I was adamant on the fact that I don't want to actually allow this woman to think that in order to be able to settle and get the best, they have to basically go couch casting. You see what I mean? And I would say it is really incumbent on us that we should actually not just be thinking myopically and thinking for now, and realize that basically if we don't change the environment is going to persist for our grandchildren and our children. You know what I mean? Well, maybe now I should be looking at grandchildren, and I've got 2 granddaughters. You know what I mean? And maybe some way, somehow, in them, they actually have got the, the creative, gene in them. And once they want to go into the industry, they shouldn't find the industry being like this.
No, absolutely.
It's incumbent on us.
Absolutely. I've got a Nomsan Sibande here saying that we should name and shame violators so that people who abuse their power can be called to book. Let's talk about that call to book, because we have been naming and shaming. There have been names that have come out, but it has basically ended with the naming and shaming, and yet we still see the situation persist. So is the naming and shaming not enough? Is that why we are still here? Or should there be?
But is it? I would like to exercise also some kind of caution, because if ever you name and shame, let it be naming and shaming in a structure that would actually make sure that whatever is being an assessment or whatever judgment has been being, because people can actually come again with false and motivated accusations, So one way or the other, we have to be careful of that, but also open up the space that, there should be a creditable space where these things can be ventilated, and so that whatever, and when that space, that thing has been ventilated in a very regulated space, the judgment that comes out of that is a judgment that should be naming that person, but we should have a place when now this thing, and it's only when that body or regulatory body is not functioning that we can actually begin. Because I think sometimes what is happening also by naming and shaming in the media, people can, can be malicious. We shouldn't run away from that.
So is that the slippery slope that we're afraid of? Because we're afraid of the misuse of the naming and shaming, then we rather err on the side of not being very, very harsh with our consequences for violators. Is that the real reason?
But the thing is, how do you know the person? Okay, go ahead, Bridget. Go ahead, Bridget.
Please understand that fear is real. Absolutely real. Just like I mentioned, that whole concept of this action is a career limiting. And the fear of the undesirable consequences to me for having done the right thing. It's real. So let's not look down upon people being afraid to set foot and being the exceptions. Yes, at the beginning, it's going to be very difficult because it's going to have to take giants to actually come out. But the more we begin to do it and protect those people who come out, it's only then that it will get traction. But in the meantime, the giants will continue to intimidate anyone that dares to go that direction. And all they tell you is, no, actually, I was offered. What do you say?
Mandla, I saw your hand up there for a bit.
No, I'm saying, I concur with Tatisilo Make when he says, we need that body. The word that came out was the ombudsman, who is going to basically be that jury, because, jury by Twitter, jury by social media, jury by, newspapers, Sunday newspapers can also be very detrimental to the families and also as well, to basically the production companies and all of that can be really, really affected. So it is very key in terms of how we kind of navigate that process. You can't just go, okay, cool, let's name and shame, because at the end of the day, there's always two sides to every story. You never know what happens, and that's why we need that body, that ombudsman, to basically take care of such a situation so that we don't let it get out there and be messy and kill potentially a breadwinner's income just because someone felt a certain way or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the word we need is actually a commission. If I'm not mistaken, the right word is a commission, because the ombudsman, if I'm not mistaken, it relates to service and clients. You know what I mean? That whereby a service provider is not engaging in best practices, and then you are affected as a customer.
No, man, actually, you know what? Actually, I think I'm also partly, I could be wrong, and I stand to be corrected here. We have the Gender Commission, isn't it? You know, I haven't really just went through the whole what their mandate is. You know what I mean? But I'm definitely sure, that if maybe production houses should actually be the ones that have that number stated, maybe on the call sheet as for that matter. You know what I mean? That if ever a person feels like they're sexually harassed, they can actually call the Gender Commission. And the Gender Commission, and I'm definitely sure they will jump at it.
Yeah. I suppose part of the problem is the lines are blurred in almost every direction, from the victim, the perpetrator, and vice versa. And until we have enough precedents. So even as we've been speaking, in my mind, I'm trying to recall back how many cases have we heard of and how did they get resolved? What was the conclusion? And even if I ask you to kind of, go back in your minds and think about cases that basically were resolved, you will battle to find, a clear-cut, how shall I say, verdict like you get in court concerning cases that are criminal. And we want to believe that, in fact, I don't want to believe, I believe that, cases of sexual harassment, coercion, and exploitation are criminal in nature, because the rights of a particular human being are being infringed upon. And even if it's not seen as a moral one, it's criminal, it's illegal, and should receive the same kind of harshness that, you not paying your taxes should actually receive, for lack of a better example. But there is a dance around the issue that number one, when you look at how production houses operate, they operate also in isolation, so you're not really aware of what's really going on till you are told this is what's happening. But I suppose in corporate spaces, that's how it is. Not everybody opens their doors to say, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, till something happens and then you get to find out. So it does feel like a lot of structures have to be put in place to get to the point whereby these sort of issues can be addressed immediately, because it's all about making the space safe. The space.
I think safe. I still, and I would want to reiterate this, that I think the Gender Commission is the place. Gender equality. What is the Commission for Gender Equality? That is the best place for us to actually even begin to deal with this sexual harassment, because I think they have the experts, in the commission, and basically that's where these things will be properly ventilated. And I think, like I was saying, I think every production house, and we are going to be starting to work together, Mandla, basically, on our call sheet, we should have the toll-free, the call, what is the number for the Commission for Gender Equality, so that where there are issues of that, maybe, and people should go and should call a thing and have the thing ventilated there. Like, Mandla was saying that, and look, I have been a victim of that in one way or the other. Where now somebody just went to the media, and those things, my bro, talk about career limiting. They are career limiting. They are career limiting, and career limiting is not only on one side, but it's also on the other. Because an allegation made by a woman, people tend to believe it without any reason, without any evidence at times.
Fantastic. These are just chats from the GFC. We need to equally address with violation everyone in the workplace. Of course, government agencies should be involved, and they've signed a pledge to promote and support the SWIFT Code of Conduct to begin addressing unspoken issues that have been, of course, affecting our industry adversely. And amongst plans to ensure productions, institute good practices in the workplace, and GFC will also basically train all funded productions, and I suppose in etiquette and ethics, and of course the moral code in terms of harassment and policy that was developed by SWIFT. And of course, yes, the Commission for Gender Equality will be engaged to regulate. Of course, they're busy doing that. Manage sexual conduct issues on film sets. So that's their commitment.
That's them. Yeah,
but like I said in the beginning of this conversation, we as brothers who are being seen as giants in this industry are being looked up to as people with potential solutions and people who can actually bring about change in the landscape, for our granddaughters, like Tatisela has said. And I suppose one question here which stands out, and I just want to bring that because it's a question that applies to each and one of us personally, is if at all in our experiences, we have had to deal with cases of violations, either reported to us by others, either perpetrated by us to others, or either perpetrated by others onto us on a personal level, and how do we resolve that?
Look, I think in the space that I have played, for instance, it has been the space of basically like domestic violence, and the thing is, how did I basically deal with it? I dealt with it by making sure that I change. You know what I mean? And I think, this is also one thing that somehow has got to be laid on the table. That in life we do certain things because we didn't know any better. You know what I mean? And I think when you basically, like, as you grow up and as you engage your conscience as well, and I think for me it was even not even because I was admonished from outside. It was actually me being admonished by my own conscience. You know what I mean? And I think that is one thing that also we've got to start cultivating in ourselves. That anybody who's listening, be it men or women, let's begin to cultivate our conscience and begin to want to create the kind of world that we would want to, that we will all be proud of and be happy to leave as a legacy even to our children. And as I speak, even now, I mean, I've got a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old, and without fail, I'm actually passing on the knowledge and the understanding, that I have gathered in life to them, so that they don't make the same mistakes that I have made. And for me, that is, the thing that we've got to do. We have to make sure that we create a better template than the template that we have had throughout the age, and take control of the trajectory that we want our society to take. Yeah.
Thank you for that, sir.
All right. I've walked away from a few scenarios where there was somebody disempowered wanting to say thank you because they had no other methods or gadgets or anything to say thank you. And you just say, listen, I'm getting paid to do what I do. You don't owe me anything. And yes, they feel ashamed and whatever after that, to think, oh, isn't that Jerry now going to think I'm a bad woman, I'm a bad girl, I do these sorts of things. And so after that kind of scenario, you then have to counsel those people to say, I understand, and it all makes sense. However, not with me, not with me. And I wish you could go on in your career without having to do that. And please understand, when Silo talks about the abuse, there are those people who, because they want to pull you down, they send the girls on you because they want to create a story about you. Purposeful setups. And let's also acknowledge that. And those setups are from men and women because they have issues with who you are, what you're doing, the agenda that you are pursuing. So there's also that issue, and we live in the world. That's what happens. So let me tell you, the biblical solution of Joseph: walk away. Don't try and negotiate, walk away, because you don't know. I was in the States when there was a black mayor who he got somebody to come to his place, and there were cameramen behind the curtains. And that was the end of him, the end of his career. And so it's a pity. There is a lot of the PhD syndrome also that we have to deal with. And then our sisters are used as pawns in that regard. I didn't want to go there. That's why you saw me reluctant to answer this question. But yes, we've had to deal with those. And I was in an organization set up where the group that had come with me to like a festival sort of thing, I made it clear to everybody, don't touch. It was like, who does he think he is? Is he going to marry those girls? You get labeled. And you see, too many a time, we run away from what we believe because we are afraid of labels that gets attached to us. And it takes growing up and integrity to say, plug the label, go ahead. I stand by the principle that I stand for. Because really, the vultures, they are ruthless and they are quite open, but the good men are not open. And what we're saying is, let's have a few good men in each production, in each environment, so that if two agree, it's like gents, and then the third one comes up and says, no, I agree with you. I will live by example and I will say it. That's where the policies and all that will support that. But until and unless the men in this industry own this, we're going nowhere.
And also, but just to add on that, Brajer, is that also we should realize that where our nation is going is actually incumbent on us what we do, and in fact, we are in a very, very powerful space, and how we do things, actually, tabloids are having fun because, or they are what they are, because people who make the tabloids to sell are actually people who are more in the entertainment industry or public people, people who are in public, what I mean? And that's what makes it, the tabloids. And but also we shouldn't even forget the other aspect, that gossip is nice. Everybody loves gossip. You know what I mean? Everybody loves gossip. So, those are the things that we got to bear in mind, that, they are at play here, and but we really have got to take responsibility on where we are taking our nation to. Our nation is one of the things that I remember, even, the times of generation. Sometimes I used to, when I looked at how people were like, who are you? And at the back of my mind, I used to say, but what is it that I'm doing that is helping them to get out of the situation that they are in? And I'm talking about them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And at that time, there was nothing, and when you looked at generation, it was just entertainment. Somewhere it made people to dream, but the truth of the matter, it was not doing anything to them. So some way, somehow, as Black people and as Black leaders in our industry, we got to start thinking consciously and be driven by our conscience, and know that we are rebuilding and reconstructing a nation, and the African nation that has been downtrodden for centuries.
And here's what we need to accept, Ati. When we speak, people listen. And somehow the world thinks their legends
The world.
know.
Yeah.
They think we know. And they listen. And it's up to us to exploit that ear that listens, that says, I don't, I'm advertising now. I'm writing a book that says, I'm a man and I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I am a man and I don't. Therefore, I'm saying I'm a man, therefore I'm not a cripple. Don't say he's a man, therefore it makes sense. No, it doesn't make sense, and it's not right. It's not right. And so I wish to challenge those legends and everybody on this platform and other platforms that will play this clip here to say, open your mouth in the production, in whatever, and someone will listen. Someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. So I'm just knowledge that I'm getting from my elders, and I think, I'd be doing injustice to the platform if I was speaking a lot more, because what obviously the two gentlemen are speaking about is what we face on a daily basis, I'd say. I mean, at the end of the day, after productions, it's the rap parties, it's you understand, our industry it's a culture of celebration through and through. Do you get what I'm saying? We kind of go there to that space to play, and we need to shift that type of mindset from, because I mean, my biggest philosophy is every day that I'm on set, it's another day in paradise. Do you get what I'm saying? And it's not just for me, it's all other filmmakers and all sorts of things. We don't have that whole notion that we are going into a corporate space. So obviously such chats and such things will definitely open up and give the young people, that type of knowledge and that type of awareness, so that they understand exactly that as much as, this is great, this is fun, this is beautiful, this is passion, it's a workplace and it needs to be respected and treated so.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And even to add on that whole thing of, and the whole thing of using the analogy of the head, and that goes also to even to women, because they too have got heads. You know what I mean? And their brains are basically monitoring. When a person gets brain damaged, one thing that becomes very clear is that person is non-existent. Somehow they can keep that person alive with with machines. But when the brain is not working, then that person is buggered. And I think basically by not allowing ourselves to use our heads and our brains, we are actually lending ourselves into situations where we are almost dysfunctional, and as if we are actually, we become worse off than animals. Animals through instincts, they maintain their kingdoms. And our kingdom, the human kingdom, is in disarray. All because we are not wanting to use our brains and our minds, and want to actually, we subscribe to the culture. One thing led to another. No, you are constantly making choices. Yes. There's no one thing, and as you understand, even in the industry, as actors, you are constantly making choices on how to play something. And in life too, you make choices. And people have got to be responsible for the choices that they make. And whatever thing that they do leads up to finding them in the wrong, they shouldn't be blaming the situation, they should be blaming themselves. But people don't want to take responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this situation has been created by men. It's not an accident. It's not a natural disaster. Society, and by society, I mean patriarchy and men, have created this very, very toxic situation whereby a lot of women do not feel safe on film sets. And young women are afraid for...
No, but Ahman, sorry, if I may interrupt. It is not only that women are not feeling safe on film sets. Women don't feel safe everywhere. Yes. You know what I mean? And that is a problem.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Definitely. So we got to address this on and off the set.
Exactly.
The culture has got to be addressed on and off the set.
Absolutely.
You know.
So there's and of course there's another. We try as much as possible to be very, very all-encompassing in terms of the potential pool of those who can be vulnerable and victimized, and it's clear that even men are also in this pool of those who can be vulnerable. But we're talking about women here in particular because it is that house that is on fire, like they say.
Yeah.
It's not, even though all lives matter at the moment, Black lives matter. Even though we're talking about society matters, in terms of gender-based violence, but we're speaking specifically to the women issue about how they matter right now and how they should be, how the issue of what is affecting them on sets is basically addressed, and how we as men play our part in making sure that happens. Look, we've come almost to the end of this particular session, and I just want to throw the floor open to our panelists in case of anything they'd like to add. There have been quite a couple of engagements from the YouTube live stream, and everybody is basically, Nomsa Sibande has been very, very vocal. She's been speaking about why don't we have HR departments in production companies? How is it possible that production companies that deal with human resources basically as the main resource, but don't have a human resource department?
That's a serious anomaly. That's a serious anomaly.
You don't have a show, but yet you don't have a human resource. So it's a very, very powerful point. Ayanda Baroto also basically endorses that point. Where is HR? And HR are not biased. They don't know you. They don't know the producer. They're not friends with anybody, so they can, of course, be objective in how they execute their services and their jobs, instead of, because I know it does get very, very amorphous when you have hired a particular actor whom, for example, now I'm casting you in Tetejeri, and I'm not going to ask you to audition. And if I were to hear that Tetejeri is doing a particular sort of thing, it becomes very difficult for me to engage. Of course, I would have to hand that over to somebody who does not have the same kind of blindness that I do. And I think that's one way forward in terms of dealing with this issue. But yet, like I said, let me throw the floor open to our panelists in terms of closing remarks. Over to you, gentlemen. How do we basically decolonize this sector once and for all? It doesn't even have to be
Mandla Kuluma.
anything.
Stale phezulu manje stale nzansi.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Say your parting shot now.
Definitely.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much, gentlemen. I've really learned a lot. It's been an honor to, as I said, to be part of this panel. And I'd love to basically just leave our audiences with these words. The more you learn, the more you realize how little you know. And this type of topic needs to be said all the time. It needs to be reiterated. Education is key, and we can never have enough conversations around this matter. And as I said, it's the beginning now, and to change it now. So thank you very much to you, Adze. You were really, really amazing as our chair.
But thank you.
Thank you.
I receive it. Any compliment is welcome right now.
Yeah, I'd say thank you, and you've driven this ship, very well. I see the director that you are now. I know. I haven't worked with you, but now I know.
It's coming.
But I would like to thank GFC for organizing this first and foremost. I think it was an invaluable, platform that we all converged on and basically ventilated this burdening subject. And also even thank Brajeri for his company, and Mindlos, thank you too for being part of this. And what I would, now in my conclusion, is that I think if I would want to urge, I don't know if ever CGE has actually done this, the Commission for Gender Equality, that if they could basically just get a data of all the film companies and reach out to them so that they should be the neutral place where all these things will be ventilated, and I think that would be a first start, because I think even, production houses, they're actually forced to deal with things that they are not experts in. They are experts in making movies. They are not experts in actually regulating things pertaining to, gender equity and gender relations. For me, that is it. And thank you for guys out there. Thank you for, for those who are watching and, finding us. We are, hopefully we are giving them something, to chew on. And we really need to make our country a better place and make our society a better society and begin to tell better stories that will make us better human beings.
Dr. Jerry?
Yeah, my typical academic thing. Let me say, earlier I said, how does a colonized environment look like at the beginning? Let me say, how does a decolonized environment look like? Just 4 words for me. 1, respect. Seeing women as equals and as qualified professionals. Forget the gender and look at them for who and what they are. They are equals and qualified professionals. 2, supporting, playing our part in the production environment, being in those people's team for their delivery of excellence. In soccer, when you're playing midfield, you pass the ball to those who ought to score. You don't hold it just because you're jealous they are going to get the man of the match award. You pass them on. Acting, oh boy, acting is like playing a game of tennis. The more I play my best tennis, the more the opponent plays good tennis that they never thought they could play. So let's be supportive of our colleagues. 3, it's enabling. In other words, let us provide them with the tools to succeed and compete. Now, if you are one of those people who is intimidated, you can't do this. But if you say, listen, I have the so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so that I mentored and I passed them and I enabled them, I gave them the books, I helped them to become assistant directors. Let's enable them. And number 4, it's rewarding. Fair compensation for work done. Nothing under the table, nothing between the sheets. And so those words, respect, support, enable, and reward, sum up a decolonized space. And GFC, thank you for putting this platform up. Machita, thank you for saying it without censorship. And Adze, bra, eitada.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I am at a loss for words. This has been a very humbling and powerful session, and it is my hope and prayer that seeds have been sown towards change, that we go from this platform to execution, that women in our society, our sisters, our daughters, our granddaughters, our wives, our partners, our friends, will be as empowered as we are. That if we find ourselves in the space whereby we are in the way, we must get out of the way so that they can forge their own path as well. Equality is not milk. Equality is another country, and we have no choice but to actually find ourselves in that promised land of equality. And the sooner, the better. The sooner, the better. There's just no compromising that. And thank you, GFC, once again for allowing us this platform, this privilege for us to basically lend our voices to this very necessary conversation and this very necessary crusade. We look forward to more engagements, and we look forward to more communications and feedback concerning some of the things that we've actually mentioned here in terms of them being executed. I'm sure as the days go by, I'm hoping not months and not years, but as the days go by, we will see concrete steps and decisions being taken towards making our film and television workspaces safe for everybody. Thank you very much, everybody. On behalf of the GFC, I'm signing out. Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, have a wonderful weekend. Stay blessed.
Thank you.
Hey, ta-da.
Thank you.
If you ask me, I think someone likes you.
Why don't you come with me and let me show you something?
Show me what?
Just trust me.
There are days, though, when everything falls into place in a series of events so ridiculous
My sister, no
that if you paid attention, you'd realize you're hurtling straight into the arms of your destiny.
There's always a price to pay. You've just got to be bold enough to pay.
Tell me when we collide, will it be love or will you drive me crazy?
Does that mean you don't like chicken?
We love chicken, we're black.
Hayi sisi. Angeke kuyenze lanto.
Join lo umzabalazo.
Ngiyahamba mina la.
Awuyindawo.
I died. She died.
Solitary.
Those are crazy people. People not ever believe that.
I want to change the face of education. Now, I mean, you changed the face of journalism.
I'm here looking for the principal's office. Sorry, girl, you're in the wrong place.
But I'm an English teacher.
Maar dis 'n Afrikaanse skool.
The spec said that you didn't need experience.
Ek weet nie hoekom jy toegelaat in hierdie skool. Kom.
Jy in jou nuwe Suid-Afrika. Vergeet dit man.
You always blaming everyone in your life for your mistakes, so that's your fault, malume.
Don't even think about it.
Charlotte, I've got my ways.
Asifika pasiyama bakule kona manza phuma emotweni ngiyocala ngimgalela ngembumbulu.
Bangi!
Ukuthi ubobheka. Ukhamba kwakhe ebusuku.
Why are your people so obsessed in competing with our people?
Death penalty is crucial in South Africa today. Crime is sky high.
Don't your people have enough?
We have nothing.
Thank you.